Story. Chapter 1. The Seeds of Discord. Caleb's fingers traced the delicate wiring of the vintage radio, his calloused hands steady despite the intricate nature of his work. The basement workshop hummed with the quiet focus he brought to his hobby, a stark contrast to the tension building upstairs. At 34, his broad shoulders and weathered hands spoke of years spent in construction, while his hazel eyes held a depth that few bothered to notice. A curse echoed from above as something clattered to the floor. Delilah's footsteps, sharp and aggressive in her designer heels, paced across their small apartment. Caleb's jaw tightened, but his hands remained steady on the radio circuitry. The sound of her movement reminded him of their growing distance, a gap widening with each passing day. "Caleb," Delilah's voice cut through his concentration. "Have you seen my blue presentation folder?" He didn't immediately respond, taking his time to secure a wire before setting down his tools. When he climbed the stairs to their main living space, he found Delilah surrounded by scattered papers, her dark hair escaping from what had started the day as a neat bun. Her emerald eyes, usually bright with ambition, now held a frantic edge. "Check behind the microwave," he said, his voice level. "You left it there last night after your call with the marketing team." Delilah's movements paused, her shoulders tensing before she moved to check. The folder was exactly where he'd said it would be. "Thanks," she muttered, not meeting his eyes as she shoved papers inside. "You're working late again?" Caleb asked, though he already knew the answer. The designer suit she wore, charcoal gray and perfectly tailored, told him everything he needed to know. "The Morrison account needs attention," she replied, her tone clipped. "Sterling thinks we can land it if we push hard enough this week." Sterling. The name hung in the air between them like smoke. Caleb had met Sterling Hayes exactly twice, but that had been enough. The lawyer's practiced smile and manicured appearance represented everything Caleb despised about city life. "Sterling thinks a lot of things," Caleb said, his words carrying a weight that made Delilah's hands still on her papers. She straightened, finally meeting his gaze. At 32, Delilah had transformed from the small-town girl he'd married into someone he barely recognized. Her clothes, her manner of speaking, even the way she carried herself had changed since taking the marketing position at Hayes & Associates. "What's that supposed to mean?" she challenged, her voice taking on the sharp edge she'd developed in recent months. "Nothing." Caleb turned back toward the basement door. "Just an observation." "Wait." Delilah's voice stopped him. "The company party is this Saturday. It's important that I attend." Caleb turned back slowly, studying his wife's face. A flush had crept up her neck, and her fingers fidgeted with the hem of her blazer. Tells he'd learned to read over their years together. "Okay," he said carefully. "Should I go with you?" The question hung between them like a test. Delilah's smile wavered, not quite reaching her eyes. "It's more a work thing. Networking and all that." She hesitated, then added with forced casualness, "Plus, I have a new dress, and I really want to wear it." Caleb felt something cold settle in his stomach. He'd noticed the shopping bags she'd been bringing home, the increasing frequency of business dinners, the subtle changes in her wardrobe that seemed designed to catch attention. "What kind of dress?" he asked, keeping his voice neutral despite the tension building in his chest. "It's nothing, really. Just something a little bold." Her eyes flickered away from his, and she turned toward their walk-in closet, effectively ending the conversation. Caleb watched her retreat, his mind racing through the signs he'd been ignoring. The late nights at the office, the new perfume, the way she'd stopped sharing details about her day. Each small change now seemed to point to something he'd refused to acknowledge. He returned to his basement workshop, but the radio sat untouched. Instead, he pulled out his phone and scrolled through recent texts. Messages from his old military buddies, construction workers he'd worked with over the years, even a few members of the local bike gang he occasionally helped with repairs. Each contact represented a potential source of information, a resource he might need sooner than he'd thought. A text from Delilah lit up his screen. "Don't wait up tonight. Big presentation tomorrow. Need to prepare." Caleb didn't respond. Instead, he sent a message to an old friend who now worked security at Hayes & Associates. "Hey Mike, got time for a drink this week? Need to catch up." The reply came quickly, Sure thing, brother. Tomorrow work? Lots to talk about. Caleb's fingers hovered over the phone before he typed. Tomorrow's perfect. The usual place. He set the phone down and picked up a screwdriver, turning it over in his hands as he thought about the Appalachian Mountains of his childhood. His father's voice echoed in his memory. Son, a man's word is his bond. Break that and you've got nothing. The screwdriver's metal caught the light as Caleb gripped it tighter. He'd grown up in those mountains, learned their harsh lessons about loyalty and consequence. The city might have changed Delilah, might have seduced her with its glittering promises, but Caleb remained unchanged at his core. The sound of Delilah's heels clicked across the floor above, followed by the opening and closing of the front door. Caleb waited until her car started before climbing the stairs. In their bedroom, he opened her closet and found the dress she'd mentioned, a vibrant red piece that seemed to mock him with its boldness. He touched the fabric, his rough fingers catching slightly on the expensive material. The price tag was still attached, hidden beneath the hem. $895. More than he made in a week of hard labor. Caleb stepped back, surveying the closet filled with new clothes, shoes, and accessories. Each item represented a step Delilah had taken away from their shared life, away from the woman who had once been content with simple pleasures and honest work. His phone buzzed with another text from Mike. Heads up. Your girl's been spending a lot of time in Hayes' office. Door closed. Caleb didn't respond. Instead, he walked to their bedroom window and watched Delilah's car disappear around the corner. His reflection stared back at him from the glass. A man who had built his life on principles of loyalty and hard work, now facing the reality that those principles meant nothing in this new world Delilah had chosen. He returned to the basement, but not to work on the radio. Instead, he opened a locked drawer in his workbench and pulled out a small leather notebook. Inside were names, numbers, and notes, connections he'd maintained over the years, people who owed him favors or respected his ability to keep secrets. As night fell, Caleb began to plan, not with rage or impulse, but with the same steady patience he brought to rebuilding engines and repairing complex machinery. Each potential move was considered, each consequence weighed. If Delilah had chosen to play by city rules, she learned that her husband could adapt without losing himself in the process. The radio lay forgotten on his workbench, its inner workings exposed like the truth he could no longer ignore. In the quiet of his basement workshop, Caleb began to transform from a man who fixed things into someone who could take them apart with equal skill. Chapter 2. The Crimson Declaration. Saturday arrived with the weight of inevitability. Caleb sat in his workshop, pretending to focus on the radio while listening to Delilah prepare upstairs. The sound of her movements had become foreign to him, lacking the familiar rhythm of their earlier years together. Caleb! Her voice carried down the stairs. Could you come up here for a minute? He set down his tools with deliberate care, each movement measured and controlled. When he reached their bedroom, the sight of her stopped him in the doorway. The dress was more than bold. It was a declaration of war. The scarlet fabric clung to her body like a second skin, the neckline plunging well below what could be considered professional. Delilah stood before their full-length mirror, applying a final coat of deep red lipstick that matched the dress perfectly. Well? She asked, turning to face him. The movement caused the dress to shimmer under their bedroom lights. What do you think? Caleb took in the complete picture. Not just the dress, but the expensive heels, the professional makeup, the carefully styled hair. This wasn't the woman who had once laughed at his jokes while wearing his old flannel shirts. This was someone else entirely. It's striking, he said, his voice flat and controlled. Delilah's expression hardened, her painted lips curling into something between a smile and a sneer. You don't own me, Caleb. I can wear what I like. She grabbed her clutch, a small red thing that probably cost more than his entire wardrobe. I never said I owned you, he replied, his words carrying a dangerous calm. But I remember when you used to care what I thought. She paused at the door, her back stiffening. People change, Caleb. Maybe it's time you did too. The front door closed behind her with a finality that echoed through their small apartment. Caleb stood motionless for several minutes, his mind cataloging every detail of their interaction. Finally, he pulled out his phone and sent a text to Mike. She on her way? The response came quickly. Just pulled in. Hayes met her at the door. Red dress? Yeah. Want me to keep an eye on things? Caleb's thumb hovered over the keyboard before he typed. No. I've seen enough. He pocketed the phone and moved to their closet. He began removing Delilah's clothes from their hangers. Each item was folded neatly and placed in a large suitcase he'd bought months ago, when the first signs of trouble had appeared. As he worked, his phone buzzed with updates from his network. A friend at the valet stand. Hayes handed over his keys 10 minutes ago. Said they're headed to Vertex for drinks. Another from a bouncer he'd helped out of a jam. They're here. Corner booth. Looking cozy. Caleb didn't respond to any of them. Instead, he continued packing, his movements precise and unhurried. Photos came down from walls, jewelry was removed from boxes, personal items were gathered from bathroom drawers. Each piece of Delilah's life was carefully collected and stored. When he finished with the clothes and personal items, he moved to her home office. The laptop would stay. It belonged to her company. But the personal files, the photos stored in desk drawers, the small mementos she collected over their years together, all of these went into boxes. His phone continued to buzz with updates, but he ignored them. He didn't need to know the details of her betrayal. The red dress had been declaration enough. As midnight approached, Caleb carried the last box to his truck. The vehicle was old but reliable, like everything else in his life. He secured the boxes and suitcases, then returned to the apartment one final time. In their bedroom, his bedroom now, he opened the small safe hidden behind their dresser. Inside was a photo album he'd kept from his childhood. He removed a single photograph, himself at 12, standing with his younger sister Sarah on their family's mountain property. Sarah, who had died 2 years later in an accident that had taught him his first lesson about life's cruelties. He tucked the photo into his wallet, then closed the safe. The apartment felt different now, stripped of Delilah's presence. It should have felt empty, but instead, it felt clean, like a wound that had finally been drained of infection. His phone buzzed one final time. Mike again. They're leaving Vertex. Headed north on Madison. Want the address? Caleb typed his response. No. But I need another favor. Name it. Need everything you can get on Hayes. Especially his clients. There was a pause before Mike's reply. That's gonna take some digging. Could be messy. I've got time, Caleb responded. And I'll make it worth your while. He pocketed the phone and took one last look around the apartment. The radio parts still lay scattered on his workbench downstairs, but he left them there. Some things weren't worth fixing. The truck's engine rumbled to life, its familiar sound grounding him in the moment. As he pulled away from the apartment, his mind was already working through the next steps. Hayes & Associates was one of the city's most prestigious law firms, its clients including some of the most powerful people in the state. But every fortress had its weak points. Every structure could be dismantled if you knew where to apply pressure. Caleb headed west, toward the mountains of his youth. The city lights faded in his rearview mirror, but the image of Delilah in that red dress remained burned into his memory. It would serve as a reminder of why some betrayals couldn't be forgiven, and why revenge, when properly executed, required patience, planning, and an absolute commitment to seeing things through to their bitter end. Chapter 3. The Ghost in the Machine. The gravel crunched under the truck's tires as Caleb pulled up to his family's cabin. The structure stood silhouetted against the night sky, a testament to 3 generations of his family's determination to carve out a life in these mountains. He'd maintained it over the years, keeping it as a refuge from city life. Now it would serve a different purpose. He began unloading the boxes and suitcases, carrying them not into the cabin but to the fire pit in the backyard. Each item was placed with purpose, building a pyre of memories and betrayals. The designer clothes Delilah had begun wearing to catch Sterling's eye, the photographs marking their life together. The small gifts he'd given her over the years, each one representing a moment he'd thought they were building something lasting. Inside the cabin, Caleb moved with purpose. He powered up his laptop and connected to the satellite internet he'd installed years ago, his one concession to modern necessity. Then he began making calls. Jackson? It's Caleb. Remember that favor you owe me from the Peterson job? He paused, listening. Yeah, I'm calling it in. Need everything you can get on Sterling Hayes. Focus on his clients, especially any dealing with trust accounts. Another call. Marcus? That bike gang still giving you trouble at the bar? I can help with that, but I need something first. Your cousins still work in the DA's office? Call after call, Caleb reached out to his network. Each conversation was brief, focused. No emotional explanations, no seeking sympathy. Just clear requests and promised rewards. Some refused, but most agreed to help. They recognized something in his voice, a coldness that demanded respect. Between calls, he researched. Sterling Hayes's public record was impressive. Harvard Law, charity board memberships, society page appearances. But Caleb wasn't interested in the public image. He was looking for pressure points. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Cousin says Hayes has gambling debts. High-stakes poker games at the Marina Club. Nothing official, but rumors of client funds being moved around. Caleb saved the information in an encrypted file. Another piece of the puzzle. Outside, he approached the pyre of Delilah's belongings. The gasoline can felt heavy in his hand as he soaked each item. The designer labels, the expensive fabrics, the carefully curated accessories. All of it would burn. His phone buzzed again. Jackson. Got something. Hayes handled divorces for 3 city council members. Sealed records. Want me to dig deeper? Yes, Caleb typed back. Whatever it takes. He struck a match and watched it flare in the darkness. The flame held steady in his firm grip, a small point of light against the vast darkness of the mountain night. With deliberate slowness, he touched it to the gasoline-soaked pile. The fire caught immediately, eating through expensive fabrics and precious memories with equal hunger. Caleb stood watching, his face illuminated by the flames. In the fire's light, his features seemed carved from stone. Hard, unforgiving, immovable. Inside the cabin, his phone continued to buzz with incoming information. His network was responding faster than expected, perhaps sensing the opportunity in his revenge. Each message added another layer to his understanding of Sterling Hayes's vulnerabilities. The flames grew higher, consuming the evidence of his life with Delilah. As he watched, his phone rang, a different contact this time. Caleb, the gruff voice said when he answered. It's Richard from the bike shop. Got something you might want to hear about your lawyer friend? Go on, Caleb said, his eyes fixed on the fire. Guy's got a reputation at the tracks. Bets big, loses bigger. Word is he's been dipping into places he shouldn't to cover his debts. Caleb's jaw tightened. How much? Numbers I'm hearing are north of 6 figures. Maybe more. Who's he betting with? That's the interesting part, Richard said. Some heavy players. People you don't want to owe money to. Caleb saved this information alongside the rest. Sterling Hayes, the polished lawyer with the perfect smile, was starting to show cracks in his facade. Another text came through, this one from someone inside Hayes and Associates. Your wife just made senior marketing executive. Announcement next week. Hayes pushed it through personally. The pieces were falling into place. Delilah's ambition, Sterling's influence, the late nights, the red dress. It all formed a pattern of calculated advancement. She hadn't just betrayed their marriage. She turned it into a stepping stone for her ambitions. Caleb moved to his workbench, where an old ham radio sat among his tools. He'd learned years ago that sometimes the old ways were the most reliable. People trusted phones, relied on encryption, forgot that signals could be intercepted by simpler means. He began setting up the radio equipment, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. Each component was tested, each connection secured. Like the radio in his basement workshop, this one would serve a purpose. But instead of bringing things together, it would help tear them apart. His phone buzzed again. A message from Mike at security. Hayes just dropped her off. Looked pretty cozy. Want the security footage? No, Caleb replied. But keep watching. Note every time they're alone together. Every meeting, every business dinner. I want it all documented. The fire outside was beginning to die down. The expensive clothes and cherished memories reduced to ash. Caleb stood at his workbench, surrounded by the tools of his trade, both mechanical and informational. Each would play its part in what was to come. He picked up an old photograph of his family's cabin, taken when his father still lived here. The mountain people had their own code of justice, passed down through generations. It wasn't about quick revenge or emotional outbursts. It was about patience, about understanding your target, about knowing exactly where to strike to cause the most damage. His phone buzzed one final time for the night. A text from an unknown number. Meeting set for tomorrow. Marina Club. Hayes will be there with his high roller friends. Want the details? Caleb typed back a single word. Everything. He looked around the cabin, at the walls that held generations of his family's history. They'd taught him about honor, about the weight of a man's word, about the consequences of betrayal. Now he would put those lessons to use. The night was growing late, but Caleb felt no need for sleep. Instead, he began organizing the information he'd gathered, creating a detailed map of Sterling Hayes' weaknesses and Delilah's ambitions. Each piece of data was a weapon, waiting to be deployed at the right moment. Outside, the fire had burned down to embers, leaving nothing but ash where Delilah's belongings had been. It was fitting, Caleb thought. From these ashes, something new would rise. Not a reconciliation or a fresh start, but a reckoning. He pulled out his old military notebook and began to write. Each page filled with details, names, dates, connections, vulnerabilities. This wasn't just about exposing an affair or ruining a career. This was about dismantling the carefully constructed world that Delilah and Sterling had built on betrayal and ambition. The first light of dawn was starting to show through the cabin windows when Caleb finally set down his pen. The notebook was filled with the framework of his plan. A plan that would use the city's own corrupt systems against those who thought they could manipulate them without consequence. He stood and walked to the cabin's front porch, watching the sun rise over the mountains that had shaped him. These peaks had taught him patience, resilience, and the art of survival. Now they would witness his transformation from the betrayed husband into something else entirely, a force of calculated retribution. The morning light revealed the ashes of his former life scattered in the backyard. But Caleb felt no remorse. Like the vintage radio in his basement workshop, some things couldn't be repaired once they were broken. Some betrayals left marks too deep to heal. He pulled out his phone one last time and sent a message to his entire network. It begins today. No one rests until it's done. The responses came quickly, each contact acknowledging their role in what was to come. They recognized the steel in his words, the unshakable determination of a man who had nothing left to lose. Inside the cabin, the ham radio hummed quietly, ready to intercept the secrets of those who thought themselves above consequence. On the workbench, the notebook lay open, its pages filled with the blueprint of destruction. Caleb stood in the doorway of his cabin, his father's words echoing in his mind. Son, a man's reputation is built over years but can be destroyed in a day. Make sure you're always the one doing the destroying, not the one being destroyed. He closed the door and walked back to his workbench. There was work to be done, plans to set in motion. The city had taught Delilah and Sterling about power and ambition. Now they would learn about justice mountain style. Chapter 4. The Whispers of the Wind. Caleb's hands moved across the motorcycle's engine. The custom-built machine, a legacy from his father, sat in the cabin's makeshift garage, its parts spread across his workbench. 3 months had passed since the night of the red dress, and each day had brought him closer to understanding the full scope of his target's vulnerabilities. His phone buzzed. Mike's name flashed on the screen. Got something big, Mike said without preamble. Hayes just lost 50 grand at the Marina Club. 3rd time this month. Caleb's hands stilled on the motorcycle part. Who's he playing with? That's the interesting part. Tommy the Shark Martinez. You know what that means. Caleb knew. Martinez was notorious for collecting debts through unconventional means. How's he paying? That's where it gets good, Mike said. Been tracking his client accounts like you asked. Large withdrawals, all carefully hidden under legitimate-looking transactions. But if you know where to look, send me everything. Already did. Check your encrypted email. Caleb set down his tools and moved to his laptop. The files Mike had sent painted a clear picture. Sterling Hayes, the prestigious lawyer, was embezzling from his clients to feed his gambling addiction. A text message lit up his phone. Meeting at the firm tomorrow. Delilah's getting that promotion Hayes promised her. Should I record it? Both audio and video, Caleb replied. His informant at Hayes and Associates had proven invaluable. He returned to the motorcycle, but his mind was elsewhere, piecing together the threads of information. Sterling's gambling wasn't just a vice. It was a vulnerability. And Delilah's ambition wasn't just driving her career. It was making her blind to the risks. His phone rang again. This time it was Richard from the bike shop. "Found something in Hayes's background you might want to hear," Richard said. "Guy's got a pattern. 3 different firms in the past decade. Each time, client funds went missing. Each time, he managed to cover it up and move on before anyone could prove anything." How'd he cover it up? That's the best part, he didn't. Someone else did. Someone high up in the State Bar Association. Name's William Porter. Caleb logged the name in his notebook. "Send me what you have on Porter." The pieces were falling into place. Sterling Hayes wasn't just a corrupt lawyer. He was protected. But even protection could be stripped away if you knew which buttons to push. He spent the night reviewing files, cross-referencing dates, and building a timeline of Sterling's activities. The lawyer's perfect facade was built on a foundation of fraud and manipulation. Like Delilah, he'd climbed the ladder by stepping on others. Dawn found Caleb still at his workbench, but now he was writing letters. Each one contained carefully selected information about Sterling's gambling habits and misuse of client funds. Each was addressed to a different member of the State Bar Association, except William Porter. His phone buzzed with an update from his plant inside Hayes and Associates. Delilah's promotion ceremony set for next week. Hayes making a big show of it. Whole firm invited. Caleb allowed himself a small smile. They were so focused on their triumph that they couldn't see the trap closing around them. He picked up another burner phone, one of many he'd acquired, and composed a message to Tommy Martinez, interested in some information about Sterling Hayes? Might help with collection. The response came quickly. Talk? Over the next hour, Caleb laid out enough evidence of Sterling's embezzlement to make Martinez's blood boil. The loan shark had a reputation to maintain. A lawyer who thought he could gamble with stolen money and walk away would need to be taught a lesson. By midday, Caleb had set multiple wheels in motion. Letters were mailed to the Bar Association. Evidence was leaked to select journalists. Whispers about Sterling's gambling debts began circulating through the city's underground networks. But the real masterpiece was still to come. He opened his laptop and began creating social media accounts, dozens of them, each with its own carefully crafted backstory. These would be the voices that would spread the word about Sterling's corruption and Delilah's role in it. As he worked, his phone continued to buzz with updates. Sterling was meeting with clients. Delilah was preparing for her promotion. Neither suspected that their world was about to implode. Caleb turned back to the motorcycle, his hands steady as he reassembled the engine. Like this machine, his revenge required patience, precision, and an understanding of how each part affected the whole. One wrong move could ruin everything. But he hadn't spent months planning to make mistakes now. He picked up his phone one last time and sent a message to his network. Phase 1 begins tomorrow. No one moves without my signal. The responses came in one by one, each contact confirming their role in what was to come. They understood the importance of timing, of making each revelation seem natural and unconnected to the others. Caleb looked at the motorcycle, its engine now partly restored. Like his father had taught him, sometimes you had to tear something down completely before you could rebuild it properly. Sterling and Delilah were about to learn that lesson the hard way. Chapter 5. The Cracks in the Facade. The law offices of Hayes and Associates occupied the top 3 floors of a downtown high-rise. Sterling Hayes stood at his desk, adjusting his tie as he prepared for the morning's executive meeting. His fingers trembled slightly, the aftermath of another late night at the Marina Club. His phone buzzed. A text from his bookie, Mr. Hayes. Meeting today. 3 p.m. No excuses. Sterling deleted the message, his mouth dry. The 50 grand he'd lost last week was just the tip of the iceberg. Tommy Martinez wasn't known for his patience. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Mr. Hayes? His secretary looked concerned. The Anderson account. There seems to be a discrepancy. What kind of discrepancy? The trust fund withdrawals. They don't match our records. Sterling's pulse quickened. I'll handle it. Clear my afternoon appointments. But sir, the promotion ceremony for Ms. Walker. I said I'll handle it. The secretary retreated, leaving Sterling alone with his mounting panic. He pulled up the Anderson account on his computer. The numbers swam before his eyes. He'd been careful with his transfers, or so he thought. But now, his phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Might want to check the morning's Bar Association newsletter. Page 6. Sterling's hands shook as he opened his email. The newsletter was there, and on page 6, a small but devastating notice. Ethics Committee investigation. Client fund mismanagement. No names were mentioned, but the details. They were too specific to be coincidence. He reached for his phone to call Delilah, then stopped. She was focused on her promotion, on the culmination of their careful planning. No need to worry her. He could handle this. Another text. Tommy says time's up. Pay today or things get complicated. Sterling loosened his tie, feeling the walls of his perfectly crafted world beginning to close in. He needed money, fast. The Rodriguez account had enough to cover his debts, but transferring that much would be risky. A commotion outside his office drew his attention. Raised voices, hurried footsteps. Mr. Hayes. His secretary again, face pale. Channel 7 News is in the lobby. They're asking about client fund irregularities. Sterling's world began to spin. How? He'd been careful, protected. Unless... His phone rang. William Porter from the Bar Association. Sterling. Porter's voice was tight. We need to talk. Now. Will, I can explain. Save it. Someone sent documentation to entire ethics board. Bank records, casino receipts, everything. I can't help you this time. The line went dead. Sterling sank into his chair, his expensive suit suddenly feeling like a straitjacket. He needed to think, to plan. But his mind kept returning to the gambling tables, to the thrill of the bet, to the mounting losses he'd hidden through increasingly desperate measures. His computer chimed with an incoming email. Subject line. Truth about Sterling Hayes. It had been sent to entire firm. Before he could open it, his secretary appeared again. Sir? Ms. Walker is here. About the promotion ceremony. Delilah swept in, resplendent in designer clothes bought with her anticipated raise. Her smile faltered at the sight of his face. Sterling? What's wrong? He couldn't speak. On his computer screen, the email had opened automatically. Documents, photographs, bank statements, all laying bare his secrets for the entire firm to see. Delilah moved to read over his shoulder. Her sharp intake of breath told him the moment she understood. Sterling, what have you done? He turned to her, reaching for her hand, but she stepped back. In the doorway, other partners were gathering, their faces masks of shock and anger. Hayes. Senior partner Douglas Wright's voice boomed down the hallway. My office. Now. Sterling stood on shaking legs. This wasn't happening. Couldn't be happening. He'd been protected, insulated. His phone buzzed one final time. A message from Tommy Martinez. Heard about your troubles. Don't worry about the money. We'll find other ways to collect. Delilah was still staring at the computer screen, her face draining of color as she scrolled through the evidence of his crimes. Her promotion, her carefully orchestrated rise through the firm's ranks, all of it built on his influence, and now his disgrace. Security is on their way up, someone said from the doorway. Channel 7 is live broadcasting from the lobby. Sterling looked around his office, at the diplomas and awards that had once meant something. Now they seemed to mock him, reminders of how far he had to fall. His phone buzzed again. Tommy Martinez, check tomorrow's paper. Front page. You're going to be famous, counselor. Chapter 6, The Unseen Hand. Caleb sat in his truck across from Hayes and Associates, watching the chaos unfold through binoculars. News vans had surrounded the building, their reporters desperate for a glimpse of Sterling Hayes, the prestigious lawyer now at the center of a growing scandal. His phone buzzed with updates from his network. Bar Association meeting emergency session. Martinez's guys spotted heading into the building. Delilah's promotion ceremony canceled. Police just arrived. He allowed himself a moment of satisfaction before sending his next set of instructions. Phase 2 would ensure neither of them escaped the fallout. Inside the building, Delilah sat alone in her office. Not the corner office she'd been promised, but the same mid-level space she'd occupied for months. Her phone was exploding with messages, each one worse than the last. Is it true about Hayes? Saw you on the firm's security footage. Pictures going viral. She tried calling Sterling, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Through her office window, she could see police leading him out in handcuffs, his perfect suit wrinkled, his face ashen. Her computer chimed with a new email. Subject: Sterling Hayes and Delilah Walker. The full story? It had been sent to everyone in her professional network. The attached photos made her stomach lurch. Security camera stills, text messages, hotel receipts, all meticulously documented and annotated. Their affair, their plotting, their manipulation of firm resources, all exposed. Ms. Walker? HR stood in her doorway. We need to discuss your position with the firm. Delilah's hands trembled as she closed her laptop. The promotion she'd sacrificed everything for had evaporated. Worse, her reputation, carefully built over years of networking and strategic relationships, was being destroyed in real time. Her phone buzzed again. An anonymous text. Check social media. You're trending. She shouldn't have looked. The hashtags were brutal. Hashtag corporate climber, hashtag office predator, hashtag homewrecker. Each post seemed designed to maximize damage to her professional reputation. Ms. Walker? HR was still waiting. Security will escort you to clear out your desk. In the lobby, reporters shouted questions. Did you know about the embezzlement? How long was the affair? Were you involved in the misuse of client funds? She kept her head down, clutching her box of belongings as security led her through the gauntlet. Her phone continued to buzz with notifications, each one another nail in the coffin of her career. Across the street, Caleb watched through his binoculars. His next move was already in motion. An anonymous email to the state ethics board detailing how Delilah had used her relationship with Sterling to gain access to confidential client information. A whisper campaign through the city's professional networks, ensuring no reputable firm would touch her. His phone rang. Jackson, Delilah's ex-boyfriend and his plant in the company. She's finished here, Jackson reported. HR sending termination paperwork to all industry contacts. Standard procedure for ethical violations. Good, Caleb replied. Keep pushing the narrative. Make sure everyone knows the full story. He started his truck's engine as Delilah emerged from the building. She looked broken, her designer clothes and perfect makeup now a mockery of her ambitions. His phone buzzed with another update from Martinez's people. Hayes tried running. Boys caught him at the marina. He's learning about consequences. Caleb allowed himself a small smile. Sterling Hayes, the untouchable lawyer, was discovering that his protection only extended as far as his ability to pay for it. And Delilah, who had traded their marriage for a shot at corporate success, was watching her dreams crumble in real time. But he wasn't done. Phase 3 would ensure their destruction was complete, their reputation so thoroughly ruined that recovery would be impossible. He had more cards to play, more secrets to reveal. His phone buzzed one final time. A message from his network. Local news running the story tonight. All channels. They're calling it the Hayes scandal. Want to watch it go live? No, Caleb replied. Send me the highlights tomorrow. He pulled away from the curb, leaving behind the chaos he'd orchestrated. In his rearview mirror, he could see more news vans arriving, more reporters gathering. The storm he'd created was growing, feeding on itself, destroying everything in its path, just as he'd planned. Chapter 7. The Return and the Revelation. The motorcycle's engine purred beneath Caleb's hands, the restoration project that had occupied his nights during the revenge now complete. 6 years had passed since he'd orchestrated Sterling and Delilah's downfall. The newspapers had long stopped running stories about the disgraced lawyer and his affair. Life at the cabin had settled into a quiet routine. His phone buzzed. Mike, still keeping tabs after all these years. Hayes gets out next month, Mike said without preamble. 3 years served for financial fraud. Let him, Caleb replied. He's got nothing left. The sound of tires on gravel interrupted their conversation. Through the cabin's front window, Caleb spotted an unfamiliar car approaching. I'll call you back, he said, ending the call. The car, a beaten-up sedan, came to a stop. The driver's door opened, and Caleb's breath caught in his throat. Delilah stepped out, but not the Delilah he remembered. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect makeup. This woman wore a worn dress, her dark hair unkempt, her face lined with exhaustion. But it wasn't Delilah that made his hands clench into fists. It was what emerged from the back seat, two small figures, identical in feature, with hazel eyes that mirrored his own. Caleb watched through the window as Delilah led the girls toward his door. Their tiny hands gripped their mother's fingers, their faces a mix of curiosity and apprehension. He could see himself in their features, the set of their jaws, the shape of their eyes, the way they carried themselves even at such a young age. The knock came soft, hesitant. Caleb's feet moved without conscious thought. The door opened. Caleb. Delilah's voice cracked on his name. That night, it changed everything. These are your daughters. They're about to turn 5. The girls stared up at him, their eyes wide. One clutched a small stuffed rabbit, the other pressed closer to her mother's side. His daughters. The word hit him like a physical blow. Caleb's face remained impassive, a mask he'd perfected over years of plotting revenge. Without a word, he closed the door in their faces. Through the wood, he heard one of the girls whisper, "Mommy, is that him?" "Yes, Maya," Delilah's voice replied, thick with tears. "That's your father." Caleb stood with his hand on the door, listening to the rain begin to fall. He should feel something. Rage at Delilah for keeping this from him, joy at discovering he had children, fear at the responsibility suddenly thrust upon him. Instead, he felt nothing but a cold, calculating focus. "We'll wait in the car," Delilah called through the door. "Take your time. We're not leaving until we talk." Caleb moved to his desk, pulling out his phone. "Mike? Need a favor." Full background check on Delilah Walker's movements over the past 6 years. Focus on medical records, birth certificates. He spent the next hour making calls, pulling strings, verifying what he already knew in his gut. The girls were his. The timing matched. The medical records confirmed it. Maya and Ava Walker, born 5 years ago at City General. Through the window, he watched Delilah in the car, speaking softly to the girls. Even from this distance, he could see his own mannerisms in their movements, his features in their faces. His phone buzzed with another update. "Found their school records," Mike reported. "They're smart kids. Top of their class. The younger one, Ava. She likes taking things apart and putting them back together." Sound familiar? Caleb's eyes moved to his workbench, where the restored radio sat next to the motorcycle's gleaming engine. Like father, like daughter. The rain intensified. In the car, one of the girls, Maya, pressed her face against the window, watching the cabin with undisguised curiosity. Her sister, Ava, appeared to be dismantling the car's rear seat buckle. Another call came in. Richard from the bike shop. "Heard Delilah's back. With kids. You okay?" "I need information," Caleb replied. "Everything you can find about their life these past 5 years. School records, medical history, where they've been living, already on it." "But Caleb, they're your blood. Blood didn't stop their mother from betraying me." "No," Richard agreed. "But these girls didn't betray anyone." Caleb ended the call, his mind racing. He'd spent years orchestrating the perfect revenge, dismantling Delilah and Sterling's lives piece by piece. But this was something his carefully laid plans hadn't accounted for. The girls were innocent, but they were also part of Delilah, products of the time when she'd betrayed him. The war between these facts raged in his mind as he watched them through the rain-streaked window. His phone buzzed one final time. A message from Mike. DNA test results from the hospital. 99.9% match. "They're yours, brother. What's the play?" Caleb stared at the message, then at the car where his daughters waited. He'd built his revenge on the principle that actions have consequences. Now he faced the consequence of his own actions, or rather, his absence, in the form of 2 small girls who shared his blood. The rain showed no signs of stopping. In the car, the girls had fallen asleep, their heads resting against each other. Delilah sat straight-backed in the driver's seat, her face set in the same determination he remembered from their married days. They weren't leaving. And for the first time in 6 years, Caleb found himself facing a situation he couldn't control through careful planning and strategic strikes. These girls were his legacy, whether he wanted them or not. And like everything else in his life, he would face this challenge head-on, with the same ruthless focus that had served him so well. He reached for his phone one last time, dialing a number he'd never thought he'd use. "Sandra? It's Caleb. I need a custody lawyer. The best you can find. I have daughters." Chapter 8. The Threads of Family. The DNA test results lay on Caleb's kitchen table, their clinical certainty mocking his attempts at denial. Maya and Ava Walker, his daughters. The custody agreement his lawyer had drawn up sat beside the results, its terms as strict and uncompromising as the man who had demanded them. "You're being harsh," his lawyer, Patricia Chun, had warned. "Joint custody with these restrictions? Non-negotiable," Caleb had replied. She lost the right to negotiate 6 years ago. Now, watching the girls explore his cabin's main room, he understood why Patricia had been concerned. Maya, the more outgoing of the two, ran her fingers along his workbench, examining each tool with careful attention. Ava hung back, clutching her stuffed rabbit, but her eyes fixed on the vintage radio with unmistakable interest. "Can I touch it?" Ava asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Caleb nodded, watching as she approached the radio. Her small hands moved over the dials with surprising gentleness, turning each one with careful precision. "It's broken," she announced after a moment. "How can you tell?" "The connections are wrong." She pointed to the back panel. "See? The wires don't match." Caleb felt something shift in his chest. At 5 years old, she already had his eye for mechanics. Maya appeared at his elbow. "Mom says you build things. Like her music box." "What music box?" "The one she keeps in her room. She says you made it for her birthday before." The music box. He remembered crafting it, spending weeks perfecting the mechanism. Delilah had kept it, all these years. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Delilah stood on his porch, her face composed but her hands twisting nervously. "The papers are signed," she said, holding out a manila envelope. "All your conditions met." Caleb took the envelope without comment. The custody agreement inside would ensure the girls spent equal time with both parents, but under his terms. No contact with Sterling Hayes. No moving them out of state. No decisions about their future without his input. "They need to know their father," Delilah said softly. "Even if you hate me, they deserve that." "I don't hate you anymore," Caleb replied, his voice flat. "Hate requires energy I'm not willing to waste on you." Inside the cabin, Maya had discovered his tool chest. "Can we build something?" she called out. "Ask your father," Delilah replied, then caught herself. "I mean, if that's okay." Caleb watched his daughters. The words still felt strange, examining his tools with familiar curiosity. Maya held a wrench like she'd been born with it. Ava had already removed the radio's back panel. "They can stay the weekend," he said finally. "I'll have them back Sunday night." Delilah nodded, relief washing over her face. "They like pancakes for breakfast. Ava's allergic to strawberries. Maya won't sleep without her rabbit. I'll manage." She hesitated, then reached into her bag. "Here, their medical records, school files, photo albums. Everything from the past 5 years." She paused. "I should have told you sooner. I was afraid. Afraid I'd take them from you? Like you took yourself from me?" "No," she whispered. "Afraid you'd reject them like you rejected me. They deserve better than that." Inside, Ava had successfully removed the radio circuitry. Maya was organizing his tools by size. They moved with the focused determination he recognized from his own childhood. "Sunday at 7, he said, ending the conversation. Delilah nodded, then called to the girls. "Be good for your father. Mind your manners. I love you both. Bye, Mom." Maya waved cheerfully. Ava merely nodded, already absorbed in her work. As Delilah's car disappeared down the drive, Caleb turned to face his daughters. They looked back at him with matching expressions of curiosity and apprehension. "So," he said, "who wants to learn how to fix a radio?" Both hands shot up immediately. The weekend passed in a blur of small discoveries. Maya had his stubbornness, refusing to give up on a particularly tricky wire connection until she'd solved it. Ava had his patience, testing each circuit until she found the fault. They asked questions about everything: the motorcycle parts, the tools, the cabin itself, but never about their mother or why he hadn't been in their lives. At 5, they seemed to accept the situation with the adaptability of youth. Sunday evening arrived too quickly. As he watched them pack their small bags, Caleb felt something he hadn't experienced in years, reluctance to see someone leave. "Can we come back?" Ava asked as they headed to the car. "Next weekend," he promised. "We'll finish the radio." Maya hugged his legs impulsively. "And the motorcycle?" "That too." He watched them climb into Delilah's car, their faces pressed against the windows as they drove away. The custody agreement sat on his kitchen table, its terms ensuring they would return. His phone buzzed. "Mike, how'd it go?" "They're mine," Caleb replied. "No doubt about it." "And Delilah?" "She's their mother." "Nothing changes that." "You're not going soft, are you?" Caleb thought of the girls' faces, so like his own. "No, just facing facts. They need both parents. Even if one of those parents betrayed you." "The girls didn't betray anyone," Caleb said, echoing Richard's words from days ago. "They deserve a chance at a normal life." He spent the night reviewing the files Delilah had brought. Report cards, medical checkups, school photos. 5 years of his daughter's lives, documented in paper and photographs. 5 years he couldn't get back, but he could ensure the next 5 years, and all the years after, would be different. The custody agreement would see to that. Chapter 9. The Crimson Sky. The motorcycle roared to life under Caleb's hands, its restored engine purring. A year had passed since the girls had first appeared at his cabin. Now, watching Maya and Ava work on their own small engine projects at his workbench, he felt a sense of pride he'd never expected to experience. "Dad," Maya called out. "I fixed it." The word still hit him each time they used it. Dad. Father. Roles he'd never planned for, responsibilities he'd never expected to bear. He moved to examine her work, a small radio similar to the one they'd repaired together during their first weekend. Her solution was creative, unexpected, like her mother's way of thinking, but applied to mechanical problems instead of social climbing. Ava worked silently beside her sister, focused on reassembling a clock mechanism. She had his tendency toward quiet concentration, his need to understand how things worked from the inside out. His phone buzzed. A text from Clara, the nurse he'd met at the local clinic. "Still on for dinner?" 7 o'clock, he replied. The girls liked Clara. She understood their need to take things apart, to examine them from all angles. She never pushed, never demanded more than they were ready to give. Another message arrived, Mike, with his regular updates. "Sterling's out. Left town yesterday. Headed west." "Let him go," Caleb typed back. The man who had helped destroy his marriage was no longer a threat. His revenge had been complete, thorough, irreversible. The girls' laughter drew his attention back to the present. They were comparing their projects, pointing out different solutions to similar problems. In them, he saw the best parts of himself, and yes, even some of the best parts of Delilah. Their mother had changed too. The ambitious social climber was gone, replaced by someone who understood the value of what she'd thrown away. She never asked for forgiveness. She knew better than that. But she worked to prove herself worthy of co-parenting their daughters. "Dad." Ava's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Can we try the motorcycle?" Just sitting on it, he qualified, seeing the gleam in their eyes. "No riding until you're older." They scrambled onto the bike, their small hands gripping the handlebars. Maya made engine noises while Ava studied the gauges with serious concentration. His phone buzzed again. "Clara, the girls can stay over if you want. I made their favorite cookies." Caleb looked at his daughters, so comfortable on his father's restored motorcycle. They'd helped him rebuild it, learning about engines and persistence, and the satisfaction of creating something with your own hands. "Thanks," he replied to Clara. "But they're spending the weekend here. We're building something." The girls had moved from the motorcycle to his workbench, already planning their next projects. They worked together seamlessly, complementing each other's strengths. Maya's creativity balanced Ava's precision. Like the radio circuits, they formed a complete system. Delilah would pick them up on Sunday, right on schedule. The custody arrangement ran like one of his engines, precise, reliable, functional. They'd found a balance, a way to give the girls what they needed without compromising who they were. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of red that reminded him of a dress from 6 years ago. But the color no longer carried pain or betrayal. Instead, it painted his daughters' faces as they worked, marking another day in their shared life. He'd learned that revenge, no matter how complete, couldn't erase the past, but it could clear the way for something new to be built. Like the motorcycle he'd restored with his daughter's help, sometimes the broken pieces could be reassembled into something stronger, something that worked in ways you never expected. The girls called him over to examine their latest creation, a combination of Maya's radio and Ava's clock mechanism. They'd merged their projects, creating something unique, something that reflected both their personalities. Caleb sat between them at the workbench, teaching and learning in equal measure. The revenge that had consumed him was now just another part of his past, like the broken radio they'd first fixed together. The real victory wasn't in destroying Delilah and Sterling's world, but in building something new from the ashes. Clara would understand when he canceled dinner. Some nights were for family, for teaching his daughters about circuit boards and engine timing and the importance of doing things right. Some nights were for building foundations that would last a lifetime. "Dad," Maya called, holding up their combined creation. "We finished it." The device they'd built was a strange hybrid, part radio, part clock, pure innovation. It shouldn't have worked, but somehow it did. Like his relationship with his daughters, it defied conventional expectations. His phone buzzed with a message from Delilah. "Girls forgot their science projects. Need me to bring them?" "No," he typed back. "They're building new ones here." The response came quickly. "Of course they are. Like father, like daughters." He set the phone aside and turned back to his workbench. Maya had already started sketching plans for their next project, while Ava carefully documented the specifications of their current one. They moved with confidence in his space now, no longer the hesitant visitors they'd been a year ago. Clara texted again. "Rain check on dinner? I can bring breakfast tomorrow for all of us." "Perfect," he replied. She understood this part of him, the part that needed to maintain control while slowly letting new people into his life. She never pushed, never demanded. She simply offered possibilities and let him choose. The girls worked late into the evening, their enthusiasm unwavering. When they finally fell asleep on the cabin's old couch, Caleb covered them with blankets and watched them for a moment. They slept like he did, Maya sprawled out, taking up space, while Ava curled into herself, compact and self-contained. His revenge had been complete, destroying those who had betrayed him. But these girls, they were building something different, something stronger than revenge, more lasting than hatred. They were building a future. Tomorrow, Clara would bring breakfast. The girls would show her their latest creation. Life would continue its new pattern, so different from what he'd planned yet somehow right. Caleb looked at his daughters one last time before heading to his workshop. The motorcycle gleamed in the dim light, restored and improved by 3 generations of hands. His father's legacy, his own work, and now his daughter's contributions all merged into something uniquely their own. The past couldn't be changed. The scars would remain, reminders of betrayal and revenge. But the future, that was still being built, one project at a time, by hands both small and large, working together to create something new. He sat at his workbench and began sketching plans for their next project. The girls would wake excited to start, and he would be ready. This was his life now, not defined by what he'd lost or who had betrayed him, but by what he was building with the 2 young lives that shared his blood and his passion for creation. The night deepened around the cabin, but inside, the future was taking shape, guided by hands that knew both destruction and creation, and had chosen, finally, to build rather than break. Epilogue. 10 years later. The roar of motorcycles filled the mountain air as a line of custom bikes wound their way up the familiar road to Caleb's cabin. The lead bike, a masterpiece of engineering and design, carried Maya Walker, now 15, her dark hair streaming behind her helmet. Next to her, matching her pace perfectly, rode her twin sister Ava on an equally impressive machine. Behind them, Caleb followed on his father's restored motorcycle, watching his daughters navigate the challenging mountain roads with the same precision they brought to everything else. Clara rode beside him, her nursing scrubs replaced by riding leathers, having long since learned to embrace the family's passion for mechanics and speed. The Walker Customs logo on their bikes gleamed in the sunlight. The business Caleb had built had grown into one of the most respected custom motorcycle shops in 3 states. Maya and Ava had been part of it from the beginning, their childhood projects at his workbench evolving into genuine innovations that had helped establish the shop's reputation for excellence. As they pulled up to the cabin, another vehicle was already parked in the drive. Delilah's car, newer and better maintained than the beaten-up sedan she'd driven here 10 years ago. She stepped out as they arrived, her face lined with the passing years but carrying a dignity that had replaced her former desperate ambition. "You're late," she called out, but her tone held no criticism. "The lawyers have been calling all morning." Caleb dismounted, removing his helmet. At 44, his face showed the marks of his life, lines earned through both struggle and satisfaction. "They can wait," he replied. "Today's about family." The occasion was significant. The 10th anniversary of the day Delilah had brought the twins to his cabin. They'd made it a tradition, gathering here each year to mark the moment their fractured family had begun to rebuild itself. Maya and Ava bounded up the cabin steps, their riding gear unable to hide their excitement. At 15, they were striking young women, combining Caleb's mechanical genius with Delilah's sharp intelligence, but tempered by better judgment than either parent had shown in their youth. "Mom, we have to show you the new designs," Maya burst out. "The computer modeling is insane." "And the efficiency improvements," Ava added, already pulling out her tablet. "We increased power output by 20% while reducing fuel consumption." Delilah listened with genuine interest. She'd never developed their passion for mechanics, but she'd learned to appreciate it. Her own life had taken unexpected turns. After losing her corporate career, she'd found her way into teaching, discovering a talent for helping troubled teens find their path. Clara moved to the cabin's kitchen, beginning the preparations for their annual gathering. Her relationship with Caleb had grown slowly, carefully, each step measured and considered. They'd married 3 years ago, a small ceremony right here at the cabin. The twins had served as her bridesmaids, their acceptance of her as complete as it was hard-earned. Sterling called last week. Delilah mentioned quietly to Caleb as the girls showed Clara their latest designs. "He's in Arizona now. Wanted to know about the girls." Caleb's face hardened for a moment, then relaxed. "What did you tell him?" "The truth. That they have all the family they need." After serving his prison term, Sterling Hayes had attempted to rebuild his law practice in several cities, but his reputation followed him. The last anyone had heard, he was working as a paralegal in Phoenix, his gambling habit replaced by a dedication to recovery programs. "Dad," Ava called from inside. "Can we show them the prototype?" Caleb moved to his workshop, now expanded to 3 times its original size. The main workbench, where the twins had first learned to fix radios and build circuits, remained unchanged. But around it, new equipment and technology filled the space. Computer design stations, 3D printers, testing rigs. The prototype they'd been working on sat in the center, a revolutionary hybrid engine that combined traditional motorcycle power with cutting-edge efficiency. Maya had conceived the basic concept, Ava had refined the engineering, and Caleb had guided them through the development process. "Walker Customs is going green," Maya announced proudly. "But with style." The business had prospered over the years, built on the foundation of Caleb's skill and enhanced by his daughter's innovations. They employed 15 people now, including Mike and Richard, who had stayed loyal through everything. "We're thinking of expansion," Ava explained to Delilah. "Opening a second location in the city." "Under your management?" Delilah asked, careful to keep her tone neutral. "Joint project," Maya replied. "We'd run it together. Dad's taught us everything he knows about the business." Caleb watched his daughters explain their plans, their confidence tempered by the practical knowledge he'd insisted they learn from the ground up. They understood every aspect of the business, from turning wrenches to managing accounts. Their education had been unconventional, split between regular school and practical training in the shop. Both had graduated early, their natural intelligence enhanced by their hands-on experience. Colleges were already recruiting them, but they had their own plans. Clara emerged from the kitchen, carrying drinks. She'd found her own place in this unlikely family, her medical knowledge proving invaluable as the business grew and safety became a bigger concern. She'd even developed a first aid training program specifically for motorcycle mechanics. "Your mother's new boyfriend coming today?" she asked Delilah. "David?" "No," he understood. "Today's just for us." Delilah had started dating again a few years ago, carefully and without the desperate ambition that had marked her relationship with Sterling. David was a fellow teacher, patient and understanding of the complex family dynamics he'd entered into. The girls had set up their presentation on the workshop's main screen, walking everyone through their plans for the business's expansion. They'd inherited their father's attention to detail and their mother's gift for presentation, creating a compelling vision for the future. "We've already got the location picked out," Maya explained. "That old warehouse on Marshall Street. Good bones," Ava added. "Needs work, but the structure's solid. We can handle the renovation ourselves." Caleb nodded, pride evident in his expression. They'd learned to see potential in broken things, to understand that something damaged could be rebuilt stronger than before. The day continued with its familiar rhythm: family meals, shared stories, plans for the future. The tensions that had once defined their relationships had eased into something more complex, but ultimately stronger. As evening approached, they gathered on the cabin's porch. The Walker Customs bikes gleamed in the fading light, physical representations of how far they'd come. 10 years, Delilah mused, watching the twins examine something on one of the engines. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday I drove up here with them. Scared to death," Caleb remembered. "All three of you. You slammed the door in our faces," Maya called out, grinning. "Best thing he could have done," Ava added thoughtfully. "Gave everyone time to adjust." Clara brought out coffee, settling into her usual chair. "Your father's always needed time to process changes. But once he commits, he's all in." The twins finished in unison, a habit they'd never outgrown. The conversation turned to future plans. The girls would graduate next year, far ahead of their peers. The business expansion would keep them busy, but they were already talking about college courses in engineering and business management. "Distance learning," Maya explained. "No reason to leave the shop. Plus, we can apply everything directly to our work," Ava added. Delilah shared updates about her teaching career. She'd recently been promoted to department head, her experience with troubled teens proving invaluable in the school system. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. Her fall from corporate grace had led her to her true calling. As night fell, Caleb fired up the grill, preparing the steaks that had become tradition for these gatherings. The twins helped Clara set up the outdoor dining area while Delilah mixed drinks. Non-alcoholic for the girls, though they routinely tried to negotiate that point. "Remember our first family dinner here?" Maya asked, arranging plates. "We were terrified of doing anything wrong. Dad was worse," Ava recalled. "He kept looking at us like we might explode." "You nearly did," Clara laughed. "Playing with the radio circuits." "It wasn't an explosion," Maya protested. "Just a small electrical surge. That took out power to half the cabin," Caleb added, turning the steaks. These stories had become part of their family lore, the rough beginnings smoothed by time and understanding. Even the painful parts, Sterling's betrayal, Delilah's ambition, Caleb's revenge, had been processed and integrated into their shared history. After dinner, the twins unveiled their surprise, a restored version of the first radio they'd ever fixed with their father. They tracked down the same model, rebuilt it from scratch, and added modern internals while maintaining its vintage appearance. "For the shop office," Ava explained, "where it all started." Caleb examined their work, noting the precision of their restoration and the creativity of their modifications. They'd learned more than mechanics from him. They'd learned the value of heritage, of doing things right, of building something to last. As the night drew to a close, plans were made for the coming weeks. The twins would split their time between the shop and their studies. Clara had a new safety program to implement. Delilah would continue teaching while helping with the business's marketing materials, her corporate experience finally finding a positive outlet. Caleb watched his family, biological and chosen, move through the familiar space of his cabin. 10 years ago, he'd been consumed by revenge, focused only on destroying those who had betrayed him. Now, that same drive for perfection had been channeled into building something remarkable. The twins' motorcycles stood ready for their ride home. They'd stay with Delilah this week, according to the schedule they still maintained. The custody arrangement had evolved as they'd grown, becoming more flexible but maintaining the structure that had helped them all heal. Same time next month for the expansion planning? Maya confirmed as they prepared to leave. Bring the contractor estimates. Caleb nodded. We'll review them together. Ava hugged Clara, then Caleb. I've got some modifications to the hybrid design to show you. The efficiency numbers are getting better. Delilah gathered her things, exchanging a brief but civil goodbye with Caleb. Their relationship would never be warm, but they'd found a way to be effective co-parents, their shared pride in their daughters outweighing the bitterness of the past. As the twins roared off into the night, followed by Delilah in her car, Caleb and Clara stood on the porch. The Walker Customs logo on the girls' bikes caught the last light, a symbol of everything they built from the ashes of what had been destroyed. They're amazing, Clara said softly. All of you are. Caleb nodded, watching until the tail lights disappeared around the mountain curve. The revenge that had once consumed him had transformed into something else. Not forgiveness, exactly, but a recognition that destruction wasn't the only way to prove your strength. The cabin settled into its nighttime quiet, but unlike the silence that had filled it during his years of plotting revenge, this silence was peaceful. Tomorrow, the shop would open early. The twins would arrive after their morning classes, eager to continue work on their projects. The business would grow, the family would evolve, and the legacy they were building would continue. 10 years ago, he'd set out to destroy lives. Instead, he'd ended up building them. His own, his daughters, and those of the family they'd created together. The scars remained, but they'd become markers of survival rather than wounds that needed avenging. Clara squeezed his hand, understanding his thoughts as she often did. Together, they headed inside, where plans for the shop's expansion lay spread across his workbench, marked with his daughter's neat annotations. The future awaited, and this time, it would be built with tools of creation rather than destruction. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.